Good morning, everybody. This morning we are in Numbers 30. There we go. We left off last week, clearly, in Numbers 29, because that's how numbers work, and that's how numbers works. I would encourage you, if you're new here, welcome. There is an entire series of playlists, Old Testament and New, here at the channel. You can go to the main channel screen and just click playlists, and man, lots of videos, starting in Genesis 1:1 and Matthew 1:1. I get a lot of questions about what Bible do I use. I'm reading out of The Scriptures, which is available at www.ISR India Sierra Romeo Messianic.org. You can Google The Scriptures, and if you see a book that looks like this, that's the one. There's an entire video about it. Bear Independent Bible you'll find which Bible does Bear use? Okay. So, in 29, the Father is reminding the children of Israel through Moshe, that's us, to remember his offerings and his feasts. And then here, as we get into 30, and Moshe spoke to the heads of the tribes concerning the children of Israel, saying, "This is the word which Yahweh has commanded. When a man vows a vow to Yahweh or swears an oath to bind himself by some agreement, he does not break his word. He does according to all that comes out of his mouth." Or if a woman vows a vow to Yahweh and binds herself by some agreement while in her father's house in her youth, and her father hears her vow and the agreement by which she has bound herself, and the father has kept silent towards her, then all her vows shall stand, and every agreement with which she has bound herself stands. We're dealing with vows this morning, as you may have figured out. So, when a man vows to Yah, or swears an oath to bind himself by some agreement. By the way, a perfect synonym for agreement is covenant. Yes. Get your thesaurus out. The best words. Get your thesaurus out and look up covenant and look at synonyms. Agreement. Synonym for agreement. Covenant. How interesting. When a man vows a vow to Yahweh or swears an oath to bind himself by some agreement or covenant, he does not break his word. He does according to all that comes out of his mouth. And then a woman vows to Yahweh and binds herself by some agreement while she's in her father's house in her youth, and the father does not speak up, her vow stands. But if her father forbids her on the day that he hears, then none of the vows nor her agreements by which she has bound herself stand, and Yahweh pardons her because her father has forbidden her. A big portion of what we're going to read in 30 this morning, and 30 is a short chapter. Then we're going to jump into 31, which is not a short chapter. This chapter on vows, 30, has to do a lot with, some would say, the authority of the man over the women in his life. And that's accurate, but it's not the whole story. What I think a lot of people miss here, because they see the misogyny, man, is the covering of protection that the father's authority offers those that he is responsible for. See, the story nowadays, the narrative nowadays is A, that men are just bad, period, and then B, that if you're a hardcore man, conservative Christian man, lines in the sand man, that you're just straight up dangerous. And in a lot of cases, yeah, we are. Remember that. But I digress. Our authority comes with great responsibility. And so the responsibility that we have to the women who are with us and beneath us, and beneath us in the chain of command, not beneath us because they're lesser human beings, because they're not, but who are beneath us in the chain of command. We are responsible for them. This is extreme ownership. This is, the father takes on quite the burden here of responsibility between his household and Yah. And at the end of an age, we are responsible to the Most High. I am responsible to the Most High for the way I lead my wife and the way I lead my children, including my daughters. All right. Six, and if she at all belongs to a husband, while bound by her vows, or by a rash utterance from her lips by which she bounds herself, and her husband hears it, and he has kept silent towards her on the day that he hears, then her vow shall stand, and her agreements by which she bounds herself do stand. Same thing with the husband. If a woman has a husband, and the husband doesn't nullify her vow on the day that he hears it, her vow stands. This is why in a traditional marriage, the father of the bride walks the bride down the aisle and hands her to the husband. This is, nowadays, it's symbolic, but even not that long ago, and I would say it's coming again, it wasn't symbolic, it was literal. The meaning is, you are responsible for this woman. The covering of protection and provision is going from the father who walks her down the aisle, and then he then passes the woman to his son-in-law, the husband, who is now responsible for the provision and covering and protection of this woman. Man, my nose is itchy. Try not to pick it on camera. Sorry, I know, serious. And if her husband hears it, and he has kept silent towards her on the day that he hears, then her vow shall stand, and her agreements by which she bound herself do stand. But if her husband forbids her on the day that he hears it, then he has nullified her vow which she vowed, and the rash utterance of her lips by which she bound herself, and Yahweh pardons her. But any vow of a widow or a divorced woman by which she has bound herself stands against her. And if she vowed in her husband's house, or bound herself by an agreement with an oath, and her husband heard it, and has kept silent towards her, and did not forbid her, then all her vows shall stand, and every agreement by which she bounds herself stands. But if her husband clearly nullified them on the day he heard them, which husbands, it means that you can't be mulling it over, taking your time with it, that on the day you hear it, yes, that's a good idea, or no, you're not doing that, or no, we're not doing that. And think about it. How many times should we have said something, but we didn't? And this bad idea grew legs and got up and started walking, and it started running, and before you know it, it's running out of your control. If we had killed that bad idea the moment we heard about it, in many cases, we wouldn't have the problems that we end up in. Get off of my Bible fly. But if her husband clearly nullified them on the day he heard them, then whatever came from her lips concerning her vows or concerning the agreement binding her, it does not stand. Her husband has nullified them, and Yahweh pardons her. Every vow and every binding oath to afflict her being, let her husband confirm it, or let her husband nullify it. To afflict her being, to fast, to, right now for me is a day of fasting and prayer. So What it's saying here is if a wife decides that it's going to be a day of fasting or a week of fasting or whatever, the husband confirm it or let her husband nullify it. Verse 14. But if her husband is altogether silent at her from day to day, then he confirms all her vows or all the agreements that bind her. He confirms them because he kept silent towards her on the day that he heard. We should speak up. And it's not always easy, but we're not supposed to do the easy things. We're supposed to do the hard things. You know, a lot of times it's easier to just let your wife have her way, do what she wants to do, even if you know it's not a good idea. It's not how it's supposed to work. And then wives are supposed to honor their husbands in that. And I'll say this, husbands, if you want to be honored, then be honorable. If you want to be loved, then be lovable. I tell my kids that all the time. You know, you want to be loved, be lovable. You want to be honored, be honorable. So, you know, honor your husband, honor your wife. Yes, be honorable so that you can be honored. That reduces a lot of that friction there, doesn't it? Because then when your honorable husband says, babe, I love you, but no, it removes a lot of the ancillary arguments around and butthurt around that no. We're not going to start nitpicking your argument apart. It's no. And it's no because I have your best interest at heart. The end. I've done this several times with my wife and my oldest daughter, and they don't always enjoy it. It's not about enjoyment per se. It's safety and protection and provision and blessing because I am responsible for them. And so sometimes I have to say no. Or not that way for sure. But if I had just sat back and been silent, or if I was drunk all the time, or lazy and wasn't working, or had a crippling pornography addiction, or played video games all day, or whatever, and was failing to honor my wife and my family in these regards, when I did speak up and say no, how much weight are they going to put in that? Very little. And so the implication here is, for us men, we are responsible. Responsible, think about that. You want to be honored, be honorable. Well, responsible would imply a response from us. And so here it says, but if her husband is altogether silent at her from day to day, then he confirms all her vows or all her agreements that bind her. He confirms them because he kept silent towards her on the day that he heard. There was no response. It's hard to be responsible when you're not responding to the situation. But if he nullifies them after he has heard, then he shall bear her crookedness. He is taking on the responsibility. These are the laws which Yahweh commanded Moshe between a man and his wife, and between a father and his daughter in her youth in her father's house. This is my son's canteen. That'll do. 31. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, take vengeance for the children of Israel on the Midianites, After that, you were gathered to your people. There's a lot going on in that one phrase. Those two verses. First of all, vengeance is mine, so saith the Lord, brother. Yeah, but see, the Lord, by the way, just so we're clear on this, Yahweh, the Lord in the King James is, depending on who you believe and what you believe their convictions are. There was, and there still is in a lot of cases, people don't like saying the name of God, and there are a lot of arguments over what his name is and how it's pronounced. But just like I say Yeshua, I've cast out demons in the name of Jesus. So, to one degree or another, they know their names, and everybody else in the spiritual world knows who you're talking about as well. But it's kind of like, yeah, this is my buddy Bob. I know his name is Robert, right? And is it Robert J. Smith Jr., right? Or is he Bobby? Anyway. What I'm getting at here is the Lord. The Lord of the heavens. That's Jupiter. That's very Greco-Roman. So here, and Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, take vengeance. Well, vengeance is mine, so saith the Lord. I'm like, okay. Well, first of all, the Lord nowadays gives me pause, because I've done research on my own. And it's not a deal breaker for me. It's just the roots of where that comes from are kind of, because like when you know, right? You can't unknow. But yeah, vengeance does belong to Yah. But he has lots of subcontractors. And that's one of the many detriments to not reading your Bible for yourself, because you get these little sound bites and catchphrases that become the building blocks of your faith, the bricks of your faith, and then somebody comes along wielding actual knowledge and just starts destroying the building blocks of your faith, and then you go, I was so wrong. God must not be real. It's like, God is really real. You just never took personal responsibility for your relationship with him, so you never read his word. You farmed that out to somebody else who didn't know what they were talking about, and they filled your head up with all these concepts that are not biblically supported. Yeah, and vengeance is mine, so saith the Lord, meaning that much like don't take the Lord's name in vain, don't put his stamp of approval on your hot mess. But the Lord certainly, Yahweh certainly, gives away his stamp of approval to those that deserve it, and he certainly farms out his vengeance, as we're about to see. So that is wisdom and discernment, which comes from reading this word and as a gift of the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, which we should all be praying for all the time. Wisdom and discernment. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, take vengeance for the children of Israel on the Midianites. After that, you are gathered to your people. You're going to die. You're going home. And Moshe spoke to the people, saying, arm some of yourselves for the campaign, and let them go against the Midianites to take vengeance for Yahweh on Midian. Send 1,000 from each tribe of all the tribes of Israel for the campaign. So there were supplied from the tribes of Israel 1,000 from each tribe, 12,000 armed ones for the campaign. And Moshe sent them on the campaign, 1,000 from each tribe, them and Phinehas, son of Eleazar the priest, on the campaign, with the set-apart utensils and trumpets for sounding in his hand. And they fought against the Midianites as Yahweh commanded Moshe, and killed all the males. And they killed the sovereigns, the kings of Midian, with the rest of those who were pierced. Ui and Rechem and Sur and Hur and Reba, the 5 sovereigns, 5 kings of Midian, and they also killed Balaam, son of Beor, with the sword. You remember, I hope, earlier in Numbers 22, 23, 24, we meet a guy named Balaam, and we meet him because, or Bilam, or Balaam, or whatever. And I do occasionally get emails from people who are like, you're saying that word wrong. Cool. Literally the best way for you to fix that, honestly, is shoot a video of how to say it and send me a video, and I will watch it. Or, brother, you've got that interpretation of that part of scripture all wrong. Copy. Shoot a video and send it to me. I get a lot of emails that are half as long as this entire Bible, and no, I don't have the time. I can't do it. So, but this is not about me. This is about the Bible. So I'm gonna shut up about me. Balaam and Balak, right? Balaam was very interestingly, he was a servant of Yah. He acknowledges that. And he says, I can only do that which Yahweh commands me. And he was, they were out in Moab where all the Jeeps come from. And Balak wants Balaam to curse the Israelites, and Balaam just continuously blesses them. But because he couldn't curse the Israelites, and because the Moabites and Balak could not take Israel by force, Balaam, after he tries to curse the Israelites 3 times, it's like, though, what would work? A little whoring and fornication, that would get the job done. And Balaam's like, aha. Or Balak is like, aha. So they infiltrate the Israelites with women. And a plague goes out, and Phinehas runs a couple of people through with a spear. And all of this is in, Numbers 22, 23, 24, which you can go back and read along with us in a playlist. And they killed Balaam, son of Beor, with the sword. We're back in Numbers 31. Why did they do that? Because they hated his guts. Because he told Balak how to win with asymmetrical warfare. And the sons of Israel took all the women of Midian captive with their little ones, and took as spoil all their livestock and all their possessions. And they burned with fire all the cities where they dwelt, and all their settlements. And they took all the spoil and all the booty, both man and beast, and they brought the captives and the booty and the spoil to Moshe and Eleazar the priests, and to the congregation of the children of Israel, to the camp in the desert plains of Moab by the Jordan of Jericho. Little thought here. There are clear lines between the Father's chosen people and those that claim the Father. In fact, we've seen repeatedly in Matthew 7:21, not everybody who calls me Master, Master will enter into the reign of the heavens. This is Yeshua speaking. It's like, just because you claim me doesn't mean I claim you back, which should just slaughter people. It slaughtered me when I first started figuring all this out. And here we can see as well, the chosen of Yah, the Israelites, they just straight up killed Balaam, son of Beor, with the sword. Balaam claimed Yah. And yet the Father's chosen people killed him. And they killed all the males. And they stole or looted all their possessions, and took as spoil their livestock. They burned their cities and all their settlements. Took all the spoil and all the booty of both man and beast. I just have a feeling in my guts we're going to be back here again. history is cyclical. We're going to be back here again. And, you know, that's why earlier when we see in Leviticus that there's a Torah for keeping people as slaves. And I've said it before, a Torah meaning an instruction. I hate that. I'll say it again. I hate that. I hate the idea of human beings as property. What happens in warfare when you have captives? And as we saw, the Torah for these people who are captive is actually really, really generous towards them and makes the captor responsible for them. So it at least establishes some rules around what do you do when you have people that have been taken captive. Well, you can't, frankly, you got to treat them well, is what it says. But I digress again. 13. And Moshe and Eleazar the priest, with all the leaders of the congregation, went to meet them outside the camp. But Moshe was wroth. He was pissed with the officers of the army, with the commanders of thousands and the commanders of hundreds who had come from the campaign. And Moshe said to them, have you kept all the women alive? Look, they are the ones who caused the children of Israel through the word of Balaam to trespass against Yahweh in the matter of Peor. And there was a plague among the congregation of Israel. And now, kill every male among the little ones, and every woman who was known by a man, by lying with a man, you shall kill. Well, my Jesus would never do that. Read his word. And I'm not saying that I'm special, because I'm not. But the idea that there aren't chosen groups of people and then everybody else is not biblically supported. Now, the opportunity to be in that chosen group of people is extended to everybody else. But if they don't accept, it's not going to go well for them. Let's go to Numbers 25, 1 through 9. And Israel dwelt in Sittim, and the people began to whore with the daughters of Moab. And they invited the people to the slaughterings of their mighty ones, and the people ate and bowed down to their mighty ones. Thus Israel was joined to Baal Peor, and the displeasure of Yahweh burned against Israel. And Yahweh said to Moshe, take all the leaders of the people and hang them up before Yahweh, before the sun, so that the burning displeasure of Yahweh turns away from Israel. And Moshe said to the judges of Israel, each one of you kill his men who were joined to Baal Peor. And see, one of the children of Israel came and brought to his brothers a Midianite woman before the eyes of Moshe and before the eyes of all the congregation of the children of Israel, who were weeping at the door of the tent of appointment. And Phinehas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron the priest, saw it, and he rose up from among the congregation and took a spear in his hand. And he went after the man of Israel into the tent and thrust both of them through, the man of Israel and the woman through her belly. Thus the plague among the children of Israel came to a stop. And those who died in the plague were 24,000. So this is what Moses is saying. He said, have you kept all the women alive? Do you not remember what happened with these women last time? Look, they are the ones who caused the children of Israel, through the word of Balaam, to trespass against Yahweh in the matter of Peor. And there was a plague among the congregation of Yahweh. And now kill every male among the little ones, and every woman who has known a man by lying with a man you shall kill. But keep alive for yourselves all the female children who have not known a man by lying with a man. And you camp outside the camp 7 days. Whoever has killed any being and whoever has touched any slain, cleanse yourselves and your captives on the 3rd day and on the 7th day. Numbers 19:11. Numbers 19:11. He who touches the dead of any human being is unclean for 7 days. He is to cleanse himself with water on the 3rd day. On the 7th day he is clean. But if he does not cleanse himself on the 3rd day, then on the 7th day he is not clean. Back to Numbers 31. Verse 20, and cleanse every garment and every object of leather and all the work of goat's hair and every object of wood. And Eleazar the priest said to the men of the campaign who went to battle, this is the law of the Torah which Yahweh commanded Moshe. Only the gold and the silver, the bronze, the iron, the tin, and the lead, every object that passes through fire, you put through fire, and it shall be clean. Only let it be cleansed with the water for uncleanness. And whatever does not pass through fire, you pass through water. Disinfecting protocols. And you shall wash your garments on the 7th day and be clean, and afterwards come into the camp. We've talked a lot about bloodborne illness, and their seeming protocols amongst the children of Israel to avoid airborne illness, bloodborne illness, disinfect, to wash, to clean. Now, eventually, down the road, this was adulterated into religiosity by the Yahudim, the Pharisees. They had ritual hand washing, and that's why you see, and what is it? I believe it's Mark 15, that a lot of people say, all right, well, see, the Messiah declared all foods clean. And like, that was about hand washing, bro. Did you read the whole chapter or just that one verse? But you should wash your dang hands. But not OCD, not ritualistically. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, count up the plunder that was taken of man and of beast, you and Eleazar the priest, and the heads of the father of the congregation. And you shall divide the plunder into 2 parts between those who took part in the battle, who went out on the campaign, and all the congregation. So, divide the plunder into 2 parts. Those who went to battle and everybody else. Good idea. Also, we'll just come back just a little bit to verse 18. But keep alive for yourselves all the female children who have not known a man by lying with a man. This is not, because I've heard it said, this is not pedophilia. I imagine, they will bring these people into the fold and assimilate them. We see repeatedly throughout the commands that there is one Torah for the Israelite and the stranger who sojourns with them. That means that these Midian women or young women are now keeping Torah as well. They're keeping these laws. And I hear all the time, man, a brief sidetrack. Yeah, I can't be under the law. That's ridiculous. How dare you put yourself back underneath the law? 613 commands. Well, actually, it's less than half of that when you remove the ceremonial commands. 277 is the number I've heard. Still investigating that. We'll just say it's 300. 300 laws and commands, no way. You as an American or Canadian or wherever you're watching this, in America, the average American is subjected to 4 million laws daily. And ignorance of the law is no excuse, right? So which would you rather have? 4 million laws that you're completely unaware of, you know nothing about, and that you're subjected to 24/7 with very little, if any, grace and mercy in the legal system, or 300 some laws that are all clearly written down for you that you can refer to at any time with the ultimate grace and mercy. So remember when Yeshua says, come to me all ye who labor. 4 million laws or 300? Which is a labor here? My burden is easy, my yoke is light. And ye shall divide the plunder into 2 parts between those who took part in the battle, who went out into the campaign, and all the congregation, and set aside for a levy for Yahweh on the men of battle who went out to the campaign. One out of every 500 of man, and of cattle and donkeys, and of sheep. Take it from their half, and give it to Eleazar the priest as a contribution to Yahweh. And from the children of Israel's half you shall take 1 of every 50 of man, of cattle and donkeys, and of sheep, of all the livestock, and give them to the Levites, guarding the duty of the dwelling place of Yahweh. So, a tithe, basically, an offering, a provision for the priesthood is being taken out of the spoils. For those that went to war, it's 1 out of every 500 of anything that's got a pulse. For those who didn't go to war, it's 1 out of 50. So those who didn't go are paying 10 times the levy. Why? To honor those who went to war. I mean, think of it, you get a 10% discount at any Lowe's in the nation if you were if you're active service or retired for the United States military. That's 10%. Right? These guys are getting 10 times the discount of what these guys are getting. And that encourages in the future when, hey, it's time for another military action, we need more people. Yeah, these guys that came back from this campaign who've got lots of bounty, lots of plunder, and as we'll see, they didn't lose a man. It's going to be easier next time to get people to sign up to go. Well, I could stay here and, yeah, I'll get a cut, but I got to give 1 out of every 50 to the priesthood. And I'm just paraphrasing here. I could see that conversation happening. I could go and fight, and it's only 1 out of every 500. And man, look, I got this sweet broadsword and this stack of gold and yada, yada, yada. And I hear people all the time, man, that Old Testament stuff is brutal. How could you serve a God like that? The Midianites were engaged in asymmetrical warfare with Israel before Israel engaged them with swords and spears. And also, again, there are chosen people, and then there's not chosen people. The great thing about it is there are ways. There is a way, one way, to become part of the chosen people so that you can act, not be acted upon. Take it from their half and give it to Eleazar the priest as a contribution to Yahweh. And from the children of Israel you should take 1 of every 50 of man, of cattle, of donkeys, and of the sheep, of all the livestock, and give them to the Levites guarding the duty of the dwelling place of Yahweh. And Moshe and Eleazar the priest did as Yahweh commanded Moshe, and the booty remaining from the plunder, which the people of the campaign had taken, was 675,000 sheep, 72,000 cattle, 61,000 donkeys, and 32,000 human beings in all, of women who had not known a man by lying with a man. And the half, the portion for those who went out on the campaign, was in number 337,500 sheep, and the levy unto Yahweh of the sheep was 675. And the cattle were 36,000, of which the levy unto Yahweh was 72. And the donkeys were 30,500, of which the levy unto Yahweh was 61. And the human beings were 16,000, of which the levy to Yahweh was 32 beings. So Moshe gave the levy, which was the contribution unto Yahweh, to Eleazar the priest, as Yahweh commanded Moshe. And from the children of Israel's half, which Moshe divided from the men who campaigned, now the half belonging to the congregation was 337,500 sheep, 36,000 cattle, and 30,500 donkeys, and 16,000 human beings. Then Moshe took from the children of Israel Israel's half, one out of every 50 drawn from man and beast, and gave them to the Levites, who guarded the duty of the dwelling place of Yahweh, as Yahweh commanded Moshe. And the officers who were over the thousands of the campaigns, the commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds, came near to Moshe. So after they divided all this up, the officers, those over thousands and those over hundreds, they came to Moshe. And they said to Moshe, your servants have taken account of the fighting men under our command, and not a man of us is missing. They didn't lose a single man. So we have brought an offering for Yahweh, what every man found of ornaments of gold, armlets and bracelets and signet rings and earrings and necklaces, to make atonement for ourselves before Yahweh. And Moshe and Eleazar the priest received the gold from them and all the fashioned ornaments. And all the gold of the offering that they presented to Yahweh from the commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds was 16,750 shekels. Whew, that's a lot. The men of the campaign had taken spoil, every man for himself, and Moshe and Eleazar the priest received the gold from the commanders of thousands and of hundreds, and brought it into the tent of appointment as a remembrance for the children of Israel before Yahweh. That's the end of Numbers 31. Now, history, going back forever, is simply the stories of one people group acting upon another people group, and people moving about the face of the earth. And so what we have here is Yah's chosen people group moving around the face of the earth and acting upon another group of people. And so people have said to me, man, that's just brutal. I'm not serving that God. That's brutal. I'm not serving that God. So you'd stand against him? Is that what you're saying? I mean, let's just use some logic here. That's brutal. I don't want to serve that God. Did you not just read about what happens to those that don't serve Yah? You want to be on the team that doesn't serve Yah? Okay, got it. Now I realize that it's hard to think big thoughts and sip your chai latte at the same time, but that doesn't make a whole bunch of sense to me. And so, to me, if I'm going to, and there's lots of reasons why I'm honored and humbled to serve my Creator, the Lord Yahweh Sabaoth, the Lord of hosts. I change not, Malachi. Those are heavenly hosts, and people think, oh, the angels. Those angels are holding swords. They are armies. And when we read the end of this book, when Yeshua comes back, when Messiah comes back, it's not to give everybody a hug. It is to cleanse the earth, to remove everybody who is not the Father's chosen people. Man, what people group would you rather be in? Which end of the sword do you want pointed at you? Do you want the tip pointed at you, or do you want the handle pointed at you? Handle end, please. Not that I want to subjugate other people groups, not that I want to act with malevolence towards anyone. But we must get okay with the concept that there are Yah's chosen people, and then there's everybody else. And I guess we're going to go there real quick. Matthew 21. And I know those of y'all who've spent a lot of time with me have heard this before. I'm sorry, not Matthew 21, Matthew 7, verse 21. But it bears repeating because it's totally relative. This is Messiah speaking. Not everyone who says to me, Master, Master, shall enter into the reign of the heavens, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he who is doing the desire of my Father in heavens. Many shall say to me in that day, Master, Master, have we not prophesied in your name, and cast out demons in your name, and done many mighty works in your name? And then I shall declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who work lawlessness. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and does them shall be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. So, by the way, Yeshua wasn't a carpenter, he was a stonemason. Thus all the references to stonework. I can't say that definitively, but I'm 99% sure he was a stonemason, not a carpenter. Anyway, not everyone who says to me, Master, Master, shall enter into the reign of the heavens. There's exclusivity here. Even those that claim Messiah, then I shall declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who work lawlessness. Let's just go real quick to 1 John chapter 3. Assuming that my fingers work. 1 John 3, that's page 1192 in the scriptures, verse 4. Everyone doing sin also does lawlessness, and sin is lawlessness. Okay, so over here in Matthew, depart from me, you who work lawlessness. Sin is lawlessness. So Messiah is saying, depart from me, you who are sinners. What is sinning? Sin is lawlessness. What is the law? The law is the Torah. Get away from me, you people who aren't keeping Torah. Moabites, Midianites, Og of Bashan, everybody else who gets in the way. It's not easy to hear, is it? And remember, I came out of the Sunday church. I was raised a Baptist. I was in non-denominational evangelical churches. But when I started seeing these things for myself, it was like, oh, stuff. There's a whole nother level to this that I'm not doing. And that, yes, faith without works is dead. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and does them, says Messiah. James says, who is James? Jacob, he was Yeshua's brother. He says, my brethren, be not just hearers of the word, but doers also. So there are things that we are to do to be set aside unto the Father to be his chosen people group. And it's not simply that we claim Messiah, because we can see right here, not everyone who says to me, Master, Master, shall enter into the reign of the heavens, but he who is doing the desire of my Father in the heavens. So, is salvation by the Torah? No. No, it is not. Salvation is through the atoning sacrifice of your Messiah, Yeshua HaMashiach. And he shall say to me in that day, Master, Master, have we not prophesied in your name, and cast out demons in your name, and done many mighty works in your name? And then I shall declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who work lawlessness. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and does them shall be like a wise man who built his house upon the rock. It's not enough to simply hear the word. We must go do the word as well. And so, yeah. Numbers 31. Vengeance is mine, so saith the Lord. Yep. Until he subcontracts his Israelites to get the job done on his behalf. Another really good teaching is Identity Crisis by Jim Staley. Because we are Israel. Israel is not borders on a map. Israel is the Father's chosen people. He's made that clear repeatedly throughout this word. You know, and we see in our long church history of dispensationalism the concept that the church has replaced Israel. The church, according to the archetype of our Messiah and his followers that formed the early church, was Israel. You might have renamed it. There was a rebranding session that went on, but that doesn't change the fact that the church did not replace Israel. A proper church is Israel because it is hearing the words of Messiah and doing them. Shalom, y'all.